Hi, I'm Manpreet, a presenter at the Aspiring Medics, and today we're going to go through 10 key current affair questions.
Station 1. Medical tourism is the practice of individuals travelling to another country for specialised or more affordable treatment. Discuss the impact of medical tourism on the NHS and how the NHS should manage this issue.
Medical tourism is essentially when people travel to a different country to receive medical treatment that isn't available in their home country. And this can be because, one, it's not available in their home country, it's more affordable, or it's of a higher standard in another country. And this can include procedures like dental work, surgeries, or any other cosmetic treatments. So to answer this particular question, we can first of all look at the individuals that are travelling to the UK to receive other medical treatment, or people that are actually leaving the UK to a different country to get treatments done. And overall, it's a double-edged sword on how it impacts the NHS. On one hand, when UK citizens go abroad to receive these treatments, for reasons like they're more affordable, they're quicker there, it actually relieves pressure off of the NHS, where resources are already being stretched. However, the biggest problem that comes with this is when these patients actually come back home, back into the NHS after receiving these procedures, which could have left them with a lot of complications, such as infections, botched procedures, which actually increases the burden even more on the NHS to treat these complications. There's also a risk that these overseas providers, their level of safety and their standards involving that may not meet the NHS's, which might mean that patients come back into the UK with increased insurance demands or any litigation claims. And again, both of these combined direct and indirect financial pressure upon the NHS. Equally, patients who are coming from abroad into the UK and accessing healthcare in the NHS, it raises challenges with the equitable access to healthcare for regular NHS UK patients who may not be able to access these things due to increased waiting times and increased lists due to medical tourism. There are a lot of ways in which the NHS can actually manage these challenges, and one of them is that healthcare providers, particularly GPs, can give a more comprehensive list of, for example, accredited institutions where people can go to get their procedures done so that they meet the right NHS standards and don't come back with complications. So essentially, we can give them more, or we can give our patients more information regarding medical tourism. Additionally, this might also include giving these patients pre and post-op consultations. Overall, though there are a lot of positives and negatives that come with medical tourism, it's very important that we do establish these cross-border partnerships between healthcare systems and healthcare providers in order for our patients to receive the best care possible when they do exit the country for different procedures.
Station 2. Should the NHS stop offering minor surgeries to patients?
Minor surgeries, although they're not life-saving on the whole, they do play a very important role when it comes to the quality of a patient's life, and it often prevents more severe healthcare problems further down the line. Surgeries such as cataract removal, mole excisions, and excisions of benign growths might seem insignificant in the patient's short-term health. However, they can have very significant effects on their mental as well as their physical well-being. For example, cataract surgeries restores a patient's vision, which means that they can continue doing things independently, whether that being going back into the workplace, seeing their family, and all of which have very significant and positive consequences on their social health and their mental health. Additionally, it's also very important to note that these minor surgeries, such as mole excisions, can actually help develop and retain important skills for people like junior doctors. This keeps them, competent and trained. And although in the NHS our finances are very stretched and we do have limited resources, cutting down on minor surgeries can actually increase the amount of cost we have to spend in the future. Patients might actually delay in when they seek healthcare. So, for example, with mole excisions, which could be malignant, if they delay in that, it can lead to more complicated procedures, longer recovery times, higher healthcare costs, and overall, it would be a lot worse for the health of the patient. Additionally, stopping minor surgeries can increase healthcare inequalities. So for example, patients who are able to get these minor surgeries performed privately will have the means to. However, the vast majority of patients will not. Rather than stopping minor surgeries overall, the NHS can look towards developing and enhancing services that are already there for these particular surgeries, perhaps through opening more specialist clinics and funding more community providers, or even working with private providers.
Station 3. How might wearable technology contribute to personalised care in cardiology?
When considering cardiology, these smartwatches can continuously monitor parameters such as heart rate, the rhythm of your heart, and other vital parameters as well. And these can be looked at in real time by both patients and by healthcare professionals too. During my work experience placement at the GP surgery, I actually saw a patient who came in because she was alerted on her smartwatch that she had an irregular rhythm, which was what prompted her to see a healthcare professional. So we can definitely say that these devices allow for this constant flow of data, which can detect abnormalities, such as in this particular patient's case, their heart rate, the irregularities in their rhythm and heart rate. This essentially allows us to intervene a lot earlier on in a patient's healthcare journey before their condition worsens. And this is particularly the case for more chronic conditions such as heart failure and hypertension, where if we do see irregularities in their blood pressure or their heart rate, we can alter their medications by taking some away or adding in more. For instance, if a patient's wearable device is detecting a prolonged increase in their heart rate, then it can prompt their GP practitioner to alter their treatment plan by again adding in more medications, changing their lifestyle plans, and this can potentially prevent more serious conditions from happening, such as heart attacks or strokes. Beyond individualized patient care, wearable technology allows us to gather and collate a large group of data, which we can assess for any particular trends in specific cardiovascular diseases. However, there are a lot of issues that do come with wearable technology or technology in general. The main one being, first of all, inaccuracy in the data that these watches are analyzing, and even data security, which comes into play when healthcare professionals are accessing a particular patient's information. And as we know, if these are breached, then it can lead to very significant consequences. Overall, wearable technologies really bridge the gap between day-to-day care and hospitalized based care, which makes personalized medicine a lot more accessible and effective.
Station 4. What do you think was the greatest public health advancement of the 20th century?
Over the 20th century, we've seen the greatest advancements in healthcare, and arguably in our species as a whole. There have been a lot of advancements, such as the introduction of antibiotics, which have treated a lot of people and prevented countless deaths over the decades. Additionally, we've also had the introduction of safe water and sanitation policies, a detriment to healthcare as it prevents waterborne diseases, as well as contraception and vaccination introductions as well. There have been countless advancements that tackle all three parts of a patient's healthcare: their biological, their psychological, and their sociological healthcare. I'd like to argue that one of the best and the greatest healthcare advancements in this century definitely has to be the introduction of vaccinations. They've been responsible for the near eradication of diseases like polio, which were once common, smallpox, as well as saving countless lives during the COVID-19 pandemic. Before the introduction of vaccinations, infectious diseases was the leading cause of death worldwide. For example, smallpox led to the death of 300 million people before it was declared eradicated in the 80s due to global vaccination efforts. Vaccinations essentially work by introducing a dead or inactive pathogen into a patient's immune system. Vaccinations essentially work by the body being introduced to dead or inactive pathogens, which means that if they were to encounter that specific pathogen again, their body is able to have an immune response against that. It also promotes herd immunity, which essentially means that even if patients were unable to get vaccinated due to reasons like they're really immunocompromised, they're still protected against that particular pathogen. The widespread effects of vaccinations have meant that we have an increased life expectancy, better maternal and child health, as well as decreased healthcare costs when it comes to tackling infectious diseases. However, that being said, there are drawbacks that come with vaccinations, the main one being the side effects of vaccinations. A great example of this was when during the pandemic, a small handful of the population, after having received their COVID-19 vaccination, were more ill and ended up being hospitalized. Additionally, vaccinations aren't always 100% effective. If we consider the flu vaccine, you have to be vaccinated for that every single year due to new strains of the flu being present every single winter. Additionally, there are also problems with regards to access and inequality when it comes to vaccinations. Although there are global efforts to make sure that there are campaigns happening everywhere, there are large number of people who still remain unvaccinated. And this can be due to things like economic inequality, geographical barriers that limit access to these vaccinations, as well as areas of conflict. Despite these side effects, the overall and long-lasting impact that vaccinations has had over the 20th century cannot be overstated, and it's still one of the greatest advancements in our healthcare this past century.
Station 5. Discuss the following statement. It is no longer financially beneficial for pharmaceutical companies to continue drug development.
This statement touches on a growing concern within the pharmaceutical industry. The drug development process is one that is expensive, lengthy, and high risk. It can take over a decade, as well as billions of pounds, to introduce a drug into the market, and even then, it has a high rate of failure during the clinical trial process. Additionally, the rise of generic medications and the pressures on the pharmaceutical industry to keep prices low has meant that their profit margins has decreased quite significantly. Despite these challenges, drug development still remains quite financially viable in very niche areas, such as the production of orphan drugs for rare diseases, as well as breakthrough therapies in oncology. An example of this being the drug imatinib for CML that was introduced in 2000. Moreover, advancements in biotech such as mRNA platforms, CRISPR gene editing, and AI in drug discovery may decrease the time and the effort needed to come up with these drugs. However, there is valid concern that now these big pharmaceutical companies will move away from low profit sectors such as developing antibiotics towards the developing drugs for chronic diseases which have a higher profit margin. In the future, it's essential that we do have public and private partnerships between pharmaceutical companies and the government so that we still produce drugs that although aren't very financially profitable, we still make them in order to treat respective patients.
Station 6. How will 3D printing techniques impact prosthetic limb development?
3D printing has the potential to revolutionize the prosthetic limb development process. Traditionally, this process is very labor intensive, it takes a lot of time and a lot of money to come up with these prosthetic limbs. However, 3D printing makes this process more affordable, faster, and it makes these prosthetic limbs a lot more personalized towards individuals. 3D printing technology essentially means that the prosthetics that we develop will be more tailored towards an individual's measurements, meaning that they will have a better fit and will function a lot better. Furthermore, 3D printing opens doors towards more innovative designs where we can use materials that are more durable, that are more lightweight, and essentially mimic human flexibility and functionality a lot more closely. This means that the overall experience for the patient when they do get their prosthetic limb is more comfortable and more aesthetically pleasing. The ability for us to be able to experiment with different materials in the 3D printing of prosthetics essentially means we can tackle problems when it comes to children outgrowing their prosthetics, where we can use materials that are more cost effective, as well as materials and designs that are a lot easier to replace as well. The accessibility of 3D printing and 3D printers essentially also means that we're able to give up prosthetic limbs to patients in areas where the resources and funding isn't as good as, for example, in first world countries. On the whole, 3D printing and 3D prosthetics allows a greater accessibility to high quality prosthetics, which not only benefits patients, but it also benefits healthcare systems on the whole. However, there are limitations that also come with using 3D printing to make these prosthetics. The main one being costs and the amount of training that individuals need to undergo in order for them to be able to access this technology and use it properly.
Station 7. mRNA technology has shown promise in vaccines, but also in potential treatments for genetic disorders. What ethical considerations might arise with the widespread use of mRNA to alter or fix genetic material?
mRNA technology essentially involves using messenger RNA to code and produce proteins that can prevent particular diseases or help treat diseases within the body, such as mRNA vaccinations. One major issue with mRNA technology is potentially producing unintended symptoms, consequences. While mRNA technology and mRNA therapies aim and target particular genes, there is the off chance that we can actually have impact somewhere else within the genome, which may produce unforeseen mutations, which could lead to new health problems. To tackle this problem, we essentially need to make sure that this mRNA technology, whether it being the mRNA vaccinations, are tested very thoroughly so we can ensure their efficacy and their safety. Another ethical consideration is access to mRNA technology and equity in that access too. Cutting-edge therapies such as mRNA vaccines or mRNA gene editing is likely to only be affordable by wealthier countries and wealthier individuals. This exacerbates the health disparities that are already in place in a lot of countries, and it could create very strong divides within nations as a whole. There's also the concerns surrounding the potential for designer babies, where parents would essentially be able to edit the genes of their offspring so that they have traits that are less therapeutic, such as them looking more aesthetically pleasing or having higher intelligence. This could lead to a form of genetic inequality, where those who can afford to make these modifications have that unfair advantage. Lastly, there's the issue surrounding informed consent, where patients need to be fully aware of the benefits, the risks that come with or are associated with particular mRNA therapies as well. Overall, mRNA technologies are very exciting and do have the potential to have a lot of positive impacts, but it's still very important to be mindful with the negative consequences that may come with inappropriate use of this technology.
Station 8. How might malnutrition manifest in a developed country, and how might a general practitioner intervene?
In developed countries, malnutrition often manifests as this hidden hunger, where although individuals may be taking in a lot of calories, the foods that they do eat lack essential vitamins and minerals. This can be a result of making poor dietary choices, such as eating high processed foods that have a lot of carbohydrates and fats, but are nutrient poor. This can lead to a variety of conditions involved with vitamin and mineral deficiency, such as vitamin D deficiency, iron deficiency, anemia, B12 deficiency, and GP practitioners have a very important role when it comes to assessing individuals for this, as well as screening for signs and symptoms in isolation or alongside visits for other conditions. GPs can pay particular attention towards more vulnerable groups, such as the elderly, pregnant women, patients with chronic illnesses, as well as patients who have mental illnesses, as they all do lack essential vitamins and minerals. GPs can also play a very important part when it comes to patient education, where they can educate them on having balanced diets and refer them to dietitians and community programs when it's needed. In cases where malnutrition stems from socioeconomic reasons, for example, a particular patient may not be financially stable enough to support themselves when it comes to their dietary requirements, GPs can guide them towards community services such as places like food banks, etc. Addressing malnutrition in a developed country requires a more holistic approach, where we have to look at the psychological, biological, and sociological aspects of a patient's health to get to the bottom of why they're malnourished.
Station 9. Reflect on whether there have been any positive health benefits as a result of climate change.
Climate change in a nutshell is essentially where we're seeing rising temperatures around the world. And although it's seen as an overwhelmingly negative force, there are some positives that have come from it. For example, in colder regions where we're seeing rises in temperature, we're also seeing a decrease in cold-related problems such as hypothermia and respiratory infections. Additionally, these warmer climates can also increase growing periods for particular foods, and this means that in particular regions we're seeing an increase in food security as well, which has a positive impact on health. Furthermore, climate change has led to us using more renewable forms of energy globally. We're seeing a shift from petrol and diesel cars, particularly in developed countries, towards more electric cars. And this means that for a small subset population, we're seeing an increase in air quality, which again decreases respiratory-related illnesses. However, these benefits are outweighed by the overwhelmingly negative consequences that come with rising temperatures. We're seeing an increased prevalence of heat-related illnesses such as heat stroke in particular countries, as well as respiratory conditions that come with poor air quality and the spread of vector-borne diseases such as malaria and dengue fever in particular regions. The biggest consequence that's coming with climate change that directly affects a lot of people's health is the extreme weather problems we're seeing with climate change, such as rising sea levels, typhoons, hurricanes, which have posed a significant threat to public health by affecting access to clean water, food, shelter, and even health services. While there may be a few localized benefits that come from climate change, the overall global picture is one that is very negative, and it's doing a lot more harm than it is doing good.
Station 10. Why is cybersecurity important in the NHS?
Cybersecurity is essential for the NHS due to the sensitive data that it holds about patients, as well as our increasing reliance on digital healthcare and digital healthcare systems. At an individual level, the NHS holds vast amounts of data about a particular patient. This being things such as their past medical history, their drug history, their occupation, and as well as the places of residence too. Any of which, if compromised, can lead to identity theft, fraud, and misuse of their medical records. Moreover, the NHS relies heavily on digital day-to-day healthcare systems, all the way from scheduling patient appointments to electronic health records. A cyber attack could cripple these systems, leading to widespread chaos, delaying treatments, and ultimately endangering patient lives. A good example of this is the 2017 WannaCry ransomware attack, where we saw delayed appointments, delayed surgeries, and we really saw an impact of what damage to digital healthcare systems means. This highlights the consequences of weak cybersecurity and how important it is for us to have robust systems in place. In addition to patient safety and data protection, strong cybersecurity really helps with the financial costs that come with data breaches and ensures compliance with data regulation procedures and policies such as the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. Additionally, strong cybersecurity means that we're protecting important medical research data and intellectual property, compromise to which means that we might have delays in medical advancements. Therefore, investing in cybersecurity maintains trust, advancements in medicine, integrity, as well as operational efficiency within the NHS.